Hello and welcome back to Inside the Helmet. My name is Michael. I've been a long-time quarterback and just generally been around sports for most of my life. Joining me today, as he has been the past couple weeks, is my father, who has been around football for most of his life, as a player, as a coach, as a broadcaster, and just as a fan. And thank you for tuning in with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I'm starting to look forward to doing this every week because you and I, pretty much since the time that you were, as they say, knee high to a grasshopper, sit around and talk about football and sports in general. So I think this week, the one question that I wanted to ask you about, because we try to address at the beginning of the show, at least on Inside the Helmet, things that the average fan in the stands doesn't see, doesn't experience, doesn't know about, and share a little bit of insight because anybody who's ever played sports, but football in particular, at one point or another had to serve as a backup. You can't be the star on every single team every single season. And I know particularly because you've been quarterback, there's extra challenges that come with that. And I wanted you to talk just a little bit about not only how a backup deals with during the week, the prep, knowing that they may or may not see the field, but also on game day. Um, when you're on the sideline and as they say, you're a heartbeat away, you're one you're one play away from suddenly being thrust into the game. You've been a spectator on the sideline. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, there's an old adage that I've heard many a time that a backup quarterback is the best job in the world. You know, you get paid extremely well to hold a clipboard and wear a headset and put the pads on and look good. Um, so that's the good side. But of course, if you are someone who actually is a competitor, like I am for sure, and does want to see the field, yeah, it can be hard to sit there, having all these hopes and aspirations and wanting to play, but for one reason or another, some coach maybe doesn't think you're quite the caliber, or at the very least, there's somebody who's maybe older or better than you, depending on the system, depending on what level you're a part of. Um, but for sure, like you mentioned, you do still need to stay ready. They're not going to pay you the big bucks to just lounge around and not be a quality quarterback for certain. Um, I just like
What
to
would
think
you
about.
tell what would you tell young quarterbacks in particular? I think maybe by the time they get to your level, because you're a college quarterback, but maybe the high school or even below that, those players, not even necessarily quarterbacks, but who are on the bench, they're watching the game. What advice would you give them to kind of keep them going in the right direction and not get discouraged?
Definitely a big key aspect to it is having a bit of self confidence to you, knowing that regardless of what some coach or whoever says, whoever's opinion is keeping you on the bench, at the end of the day, that doesn't ultimately define you. It doesn't define your worth as a person or as a football player or as an athlete, just in any regard. We can expand this way beyond quarterbacking, way beyond football, even way beyond sports. If you're being passed up because some authority figure feels that somebody else is better suited for an opportunity that you might want, it's very important to still be ready, whether that's taking mental reps if we're talking about a sports sense, but just always preparing. I like to think of Tom Brady, who, of course, had to work his way up many different quarterback depth charts in college and in the pros, of course. But he had to be ready when Drew Bledsoe got injured. And if he wasn't ready, if he had just hung his head and accepted being a backup, being mediocre, he never would have found any success, let alone 7 Super Bowls.
And
You still have to be ready.
I think that number 7 is important. I think I read somewhere when Brady first got to Michigan, he was the seventh string quarterback behind a lot of guys that none of us have ever heard of.
That's correct.
So yeah, um, I'm a big believer that eventually the cream will rise to the top. Uh, Maybe it happens on the team that you're on. Maybe it happens another season, another team, but eventually just keep working on yourself and believing in yourself and understanding that the game of football offers so much in life lessons and in camaraderie, and it's not, there's a lot of really good players I'm sure that nobody ever heard of because they got buried on the depth chart, but they were still really good players. And
Absolutely.
so I know being a backup can be tough to accept, but I would definitely encourage anybody who is, just keep believing in yourself and know the fact that you're down there on that field. Think about how many people are on that field who are allowed on that field in uniform, and how many people are up in the stands wishing they could be on the field. So you're already elite. You've already accomplished something by being there, by proving that you belong there. So um,
Excellent point.
yeah. So, kind of switching gears, I noticed this week something happened in college football that kind of caught a lot of people by surprise, and that was that Penn State decided to terminate their head coach, James Franklin, I believe is his name, a guy who'd had a lot of success there, but never seemed to win, I guess, the big game or the important games or whatever else. But I believe if correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Penn State had been a top 5 team at one
They
point,
were.
and
I believe going into the season, they were the preseason number 2 ranked
yeah,
team in college football, if I'm remembering correctly. But
yeah.
by now, they lost a few games to maybe some opponents that they should have beaten up on. And I believe now they're unranked.
I think that's right, and I think if what I read is accurate, that they were really just a couple of plays away from maybe being undefeated or maybe a one-loss team. So it wasn't like some disastrous thing. But this coach had been there for a while, well respected. And I'm not even saying this. I'm not a huge Penn State fan or anything, but. Uh, Kind of surprised to see a guy mid-season let go like that. And I wanted to talk about, you've been around a whole bunch of coaches. I've been around a whole bunch of coaches, and I wanted just to address that whole mindset about the fact that they live in a minefield of a profession where no matter what you've done in the past, that's got to be very stressful. I don't think coaches get quite enough credit for how much stress they have to deal with just because of the nature of their job.
I absolutely agree with you. It's very much a short-term memory position, um, because of the expectation that any certain environment might have. A team that is going, let's say in college terms, a team that's going 1-11 or so every year, not very successful, they're going to have very low expectations. And so if they have a coach that suddenly is able to elevate them to be, you know, even slightly better, maybe they win 4 games, maybe they win 5 or 6, that would be seen as such a great improvement. That coach would be heralded as some sort of hero. But on the flip side, if you're at a place like Alabama, where you're used to the culture of winning or at least competing for national championships, and then you have a coach who comes in and wins 5 or 6 games, they'd be fired immediately. So it's all about the context, and recency bias for sure. I think I forget if it was actually a football life on Bruce Arians or if he was just appearing and speaking on. It may not have even been a football life. It was some program that we watched a long time ago where Bruce Arians was talking about how he has been a coach at so many different places, and at one point was it Bruce? I think it was Bruce Arians. Um, at one point in his life, in his family's life, it was like they were moving every year, every other year, and that was just a difficult thing to have to adjust to and cope with. The insecurity of the job and how easily replaceable you are if you don't meet this arbitrary expectation.
I want to ask you a question because I know that you've lived through this.
Hmm.
You've been, and I'm talking about kind of uh, not naming names to protect the innocent and everything, but you'll know who I'm talking about. Uh, Coach that you played for that was not in Texas and was a new coach at the job and hoping to turn around a program, a once proud program that had fallen on hard times. I'm kind of curious in the locker room when a coach comes in and they haven't won. Maybe they're new and they're trying to establish a new culture, and you know didn't obviously win a whole lot their first year. They're going into their second year and they're realizing maybe this is a little bit tougher. When they're in the locker room, are they still talking like a coach who's expecting to win every game when the players and the fans are looking at the schedule going, yeah, this team didn't win many games last year, and there's a difference between hoping and expecting. I mean, is the language of the coaches, did they really present it to the team as if here's what we're going to do and we really expect to win? Or do you ever detect anything in their voice that's like, well, we kind of know who we are and what we have, and we're hoping maybe to get to 500? How does that work behind the scenes in the locker room?
As a coach, you always have to, whether you personally actually believe it or not, you always have to put on this confidence. We talk about Roger Staubach all the time. Of course, your hero, and then you pass that on to me. Of
Clearly.
course, how when he would step in the huddle, it doesn't matter. If the Cowboys were losing by 3 or by 33, when
Yep.
Roger stepped into the huddle, he always made every single teammate of his believe that there was still a chance. And as a coach, you have to be able to do that. You can never, ever seem to admit that there's any chance you could lose. You never admit, like, oh, yeah, the other team is just better today. No, when you win, you make it all about your team and how well you did. And then when you lose, maybe you come up against a very much more dominant opponent. You make it more about what you as a team can focus on, why you lost, not just, oh, the other team was better. You
Yeah.
never want to instill that sort of doubt or, I guess, settling. You never want your team to just settle in and say, "Oh yeah, we're only a 500 team. We're only a two-win team." No.
Coaches
They
may have that discussion behind closed doors among themselves and
probably.
realize, look, we don't have a big enough offensive line to compete or something like that. But I guess they can never say that to the other teams. I remember when I was coaching you in youth football, uh, I honestly believed probably 90% of the time that there was a way. somehow, even if we were up against a really strong opponent with great athletes, that somehow or another we were going to figure out a way to win. Um,
I believed it too.
and yeah, I mean, because I knew what our strengths were and I believed in them. And sometimes we were right and sometimes we were wrong, and the stronger opponent literally went out there and just knocked us all around the field. And then at the end of the game, you have to just tip your cap and say,
Of
well,
course.
they have more athletes. I remember a quote by Bum Phillips, the old Houston Oilers coach. Um, and he had a lot of quotable sayings. He was a very country, funny guy, but I'm pretty sure this was his quote, where he was talking about some coach, and he paid him the ultimate compliment because he said, and I hope I get the quote right, he could take his'n and beat yours, or he could take yours and beat his'n, which means that it didn't matter which team you put that coach on the sideline, he was going to win, whether he had superior talent or lesser talent.
That's an incredible
And
compliment to a coach.
yeah, what a great compliment it is. Jimmy Johnson, on the other hand, had a famous quote where just back right around the time they were winning their first Super Bowl, where they were asking Jimmy Johnson, "Hey, you won the Super Bowl here with the Cowboys, it's the early '90s, and what's the difference? Because you were here when the Cowboys were like, 1-15 your first year." And he said, "Look, it's all about the players. Let's be honest. I mean, these are the guys who have to go out there and perform. Coaches are so important." And I mean, as a youth football coach, of course, I would agree with that. Uh, but if you have superior players, you should win. I'm not saying that there haven't been upsets. We all love upsets and everything else, but
Yeah.
it comes down to, if you've got the horses. This was the Jimmy Johnson quote. If you've got the horses, you should win. And I mean, if your offensive and defensive lines are outweighing the other team by, a significant margin, and you've got a speed advantage in your athletes or an experience advantage in your athletes, you should win. So anyway,
Yeah.
I always thought it was interesting, the coaching aspect, about how fragile they are, the ones that are paid to do it professionally or in college. That it's an interesting life, and I always just kind of wondered, if a coach really doesn't have that championship squad, if they let on to the team that they know that they don't.
No, they never would. Never in a million years would a good coach do that. And before I lose this thought, I think it's funny that you mentioned Jimmy Johnson admitting that it's all the players. He gave all the credit to the players because I think Jerry Jones maybe was listening a little too closely with maybe the wrong ears on. Because a few years later, he drunkenly, I believe, admitted that he could have won the Super Bowl with that Cowboys squad with those great players with 500 different coaches, and
Yeah.
that logic ultimately kind of pushed away Jimmy Johnson, and then Barry Switzer came in and won the Super Bowl, and then they.
You know what? I lived through that,
Mhm.
and there is a little bit of truth. Not 500 coaches,
Of course,
but Jimmy Johnson
but
was a
you
great.
couldn't.
Well, I could have, of course, I could have, but Jimmy Johnson was such a great evaluator of talent and a great motivator, and he had good coordinators. He hired good coordinators. So yes, there are other coaches who could have won with that squad that he built,
But would they
but
have built that squad?
that's the thing. Uh, I lived through it, and I was a Jimmy Johnson guy. I
Mhm.
was like, who should get the credit? Jerry signed the checks. I mean, give him credit for that. But yeah,
Well,
I'm
you
a,
could
I'm a
do that.
believer. well, anybody could sign the checks. I'm a believer that Jimmy Johnson built that team. There was a time, not to get off too far on the Cowboys, but if you live through it, there was a time at the end of the Tom Landry era when the team had just gone stagnant and they were overpaying older players out of loyalty. And Jimmy Johnson came in and he said, you know what? Some of my Miami Hurricanes teams could beat this team that they have in Dallas right now. And he literally overturned the roster. He was having people come in new to the team on a Monday and be cut by Friday. He was signing free agents left and right, trying to find the right combination. And so the team that he wound up with that won the first two Super Bowls, that was on Jimmy and his ability to evaluate talent was very elite. His ability to motivate through fear more than anything else. He was not one of those player coaches, as they say, that well, we play because we love him. They were afraid of him, and that was his way. He was a psychology major in college, so he knew how to push the buttons. And I say that the Cowboys dynasty of the '90s was Jimmy Johnson, and
I agree.
Anyway, wanted to address, you were telling me before we started the show tonight, some interesting things happen in F1. You follow F1, you know this
Yep,
stuff
got the
really,
shirt, got
really
the hat.
well. So, so enlighten the rest of us who maybe don't follow it quite as closely. What happened this week in F1 that was really interesting?
Sure. So, as I've mentioned on previous podcasts, and have been, I guess, kind of keeping y'all up to date with, Max Verstappen has been on one absolute crazy ti- title charge from just over a month or so, month and a half ago. It looked like he was entirely out of the championship running. He was at one point as far back as 104 points behind championship leader Oscar Piastri of McLaren, of course. Um, but in that time, in the past month and a half, particularly in September, he went on an absolute tear of winning races, coming second place, and that has only continued as F1 came to Austin um, over this past weekend, and it went nearly as well as a Max Verstappen fan could ever want it to go.
Can I ask
Max
you?
took it.
Can I interject just out of
You may.
curiosity? I've heard you. Heard you talk about Max for a long time,
Hmm.
and um, I know he's your favorite racer, and he's multiple time champion. But
Hmm.
just for those who maybe don't follow the sport as closely, can you give us just a little biography of Max?
I
Who is
sure
this guy?
can.
Where did he come from? I don't think I've even ever asked you before.
All right. Well, you and the audience will hear it at the same time. So, Max Verstappen is the son of Jos Verstappen, who was a Formula One driver in the 90s. He was actually teammates at one point with Michael Schumacher, who is many consider him to be the greatest driver of all time. Seven-time champion, five-time champion consecutively with Ferrari from 2000 to 2004. Um, yeah, Jos Verstappen was his teammate. Um, Max is of Dutch and Belgian lineage. He he was basically raised. He was born and bred to be a racing driver.
How old is
Um,
he?
he actually just celebrated his, he was born on September 30th, 1997, I want to say. So
September
he's
September
20,
30th
yes.
on my
He,
birthday.
yes.
Ah, how about that?
He is 28. Um, that would make him. just under a month ago. Um, anyway, but he started karting from a very young age. Of course, his dad being a racing driver and all basically put him into a go kart competitively before he could walk. Not
Hmm.
literally, but you get the point. And there are stories, if you look them up, of how Max's dad was rather abusive. At some points, he was tough on Max. He was essentially Max's coach growing up through the youth ranks, and that sort of deal. And he was harsh on Max. He would make Max do things that maybe some parents would be more light about, like driving through freezing rain
This
and
sounds
stuff,
like a Tiger Woods situation.
rather than going inside, that type of
Hmm.
deal. There's one famous story where after Max maybe didn't live up to expectations, maybe didn't win a karting race, Jos Verstappen left him at a gas station for his mom to pick him up after the race, which
Wow.
obviously a very cruel thing to do to however old he was at the time, 8, 10, whatever.
Sure.
Anyway, but Max, of course, being essentially forced to be great at racing. He became great at racing naturally. He's just very naturally talented, and he rose up through the ranks, um, and in fact skipped Formula Two, or I guess the equivalent of it, when he was signed by the Red Bull Formula One basically organization when he was 16 years old. So
Hmm.
before he had ever attained his actual road driver's license, he was an F1 driver, more or less. He was
Wow.
thrust into the car at 17. He's the youngest person um, to ever race in Formula One. And then that was in his rookie year in 2015. Then a year later, four or so races in, he gets promoted from the junior Red Bull team. So Red Bull owns two Formula One teams. They have the main Red Bull team, and then they have their essentially B team, but it's also an F1 team.
Hmm.
It just allows them to have more people within their driver academy on the grid at one time. So Max, of course, like most people, started out on the junior team, the little sister team. Um, but in his second year, just a few races in, he got promoted to the main team, and in his very first race with the main team, he won and became the youngest ever Formula One race winner.
Okay.
And
No,
in
I'm
in that
fascinating
time,
to hear that. Yeah.
yeah, in that time, he of course he his early years coincided with Mercedes' dominance and when Lewis Hamilton was winning all his championships. And so he didn't quite have championship winning machinery until a few years later, when in 2021, he went toe to toe with seven-time world champion Lewis Hamilton, another driver many considered the greatest of all time. And it came down, so it was a very controversial season, a lot of back and forth, a lot of questionable moments, questionable crashes, oh, who's at fault here or there. Very heated title battle. They go into the final race of the year, level on points. Um, and throughout the whole race, it looks like Lewis is going to win the championship until um, thanks to a crash that brought out the safety car and it brought all the drivers together. There was a little bit of controversy, but it all culminated in Max overtaking Lewis on the final lap of the season to win the race and the championship. Since then, he's gone on to win three more championships, including in 2022. He set a new record by winning 15 races in a season. Then the next year, he broke it when he won 19 races in a season, 10 of them consecutively, which is also a record. And then last year, he of course, won his fourth championship while on the back foot for most of the year when he didn't have the fastest car anymore after he got out to a huge lead. And then this year, Red Bull's struggles only grew in the early year, and Max, like I mentioned, fell back about 104 is the exact point total. He fell 104 points behind the championship lead, and then in the past month and a half, he has eaten and eaten and eaten into that lead against him, and now he is only 40 points behind Oscar Piastri, and he's even closer. I think he's like 22 points or something behind Lando Norris in second.
Hmm.
Um,
Do you
Coming
still see
back though,
Max's dad like hanging out
he definitely does.
pre-race and
Yes,
post-race? Yeah.
he will frequently be seen um, around the garage and stuff during a race
Okay. Uh,
for sure.
just curious. Oh,
There's the I guess maybe long-winded biography. Um, Anyway, coming back to the main point, which is this past weekend, like I mentioned, Max now is only 40 points behind Oscar Piastri. He has closed
he was
a
in Austin. He was in Austin, Texas,
he was in Austin, Texas. Yes, he
our
was.
hometown.
Yes, he was. Within 2 to 3 hours drive from me, which is incredible. I do still hope to be able to go to that race one day. Hopefully, while Max is still racing. Max is someone who is very down to earth, very level headed, and he very much appreciates the finer things in life, like spending time with family and all that, rather than chasing a million championships. He's racing in F1 because he loves to.
Yeah.
He's not going to probably stick around F1 until he's 45, just to rack up as many wins and championships as he can squeeze out of a career. He's gonna keep doing it until he just doesn't want to anymore. He has all the money, he has all the fame, all the championships that anyone could ever want.
It's
So,
funny because you think 45 is old at your age, and I think 45 is young.
well, it's old for a racing driver. The oldest
Well,
driver currently is
sure.
43. Um,
Okay.
anyway, where was I going with this?
You-
Anyway, but yes, so coming back finally to the race in Austin this past weekend, it was a sprint weekend, which means, of course, they only get one practice session, whereas they normally get three before they get thrust into having to qualify and go racing. A sprint race, for anyone who doesn't know, in F1 is a shorter race. It's about a third of the length, and it doesn't give out a full race's amount of points. It gives,
how long does the normal race take?
I believe, so the technical rule. So it takes about an hour and a half or so, assuming there aren't like any big crashes that they have to stop the race for. It's about an hour and 20 to an hour and 40 minutes, give or take, depending on the track, because they're not all the same length. But
Okay.
the rules, I want to say that the rules dictate that a full race length must include the fewest number of laps that covers at least 200. I think it's 200. It may be 250 kilometers. So a sprint race is a third of that distance. But it's basically just a shorter race. It gives out some points. It gives out 8 points for first, seven for second, all the way down to 1 point for eighth place. Whereas, the a regular race gives out a lot more points, 25 for first, 18 for second, and so on, going down to 1 point for 10th. Um, anyway, but uh, a lot of people are critical of the sprint format because it doesn't give drivers and teams as much time. Ordinarily, they will have three practice sessions split up among Friday and Saturday local time for a race weekend. With each session, I want to say being between 60 and 90 minutes. So that gives them
Okay.
plenty of time to do laps, find out how to set up their car optimally before they go into actual competitive sessions, qualifying, and the race. With with a sprint weekend, you get one practice session, then you go into sprint qualifying. It's the same as normal qualifying, but it's for the sprint race. Then you have the sprint race, and then you go back into qualifying and the regular race as usual. Um, a lot of people are critical of it because it doesn't give as much time for preparation. I personally am kind of neutral. I understand the complaints, but also I like seeing them actually compete. So, regardless, the sprint race itself brought a lot of drama when on, at the Circuit of the Americas, the track in Austin, how the very first corner is up like 10 stories or so from the start line.
You know that. I don't know that.
Okay, so the Circuit of the Americas, it's actually on my wall right over there. I don't know if y'all can see it. The the very first corner of the track when you start a lap is up on an incline that rises up to about 10 to 12, I want to say, stories high. And then it's a sharp left-hander. So that corner, as you can imagine, is especially on, the very first lap coming right out the gates, will cause a lot of drama with trying to fit so many cars that are all so close together at the very start through such a tight corner on an uphill that
Hmm.
immediately turns around and goes back downhill somewhat. Anyway, there was drama. Can you believe it? On the very first corner of the sprint race. Oscar Piastri gets hit by Nico Hulkenberg when there's just a lot of cars tightly together. But Oscar gets hits his teammate Lando Norris, um, and they are both taken out of the sprint race. So Max goes on to win the sprint race, takes the maximum 8 points that you can get for winning a sprint race. And then comes the main race where Max again, he qualified first for the sprint, qualifies first again for the main race, and then goes on to lead every lap and wins in rather dominant fashion thanks to some help by Charles Leclerc, a Ferrari driver who was in second for the majority of the race, holding off Lando Norris from being able to challenge Max for the win. Not as much carnage in the main race. Um, Lando did end up finishing second, and so Max only took away 7 more points than Lando from the main race, and Oscar finished down in fifth, I believe.
How many
Um,
more races do they have?
I believe there are five. I believe they go racing in
Five left.
Mexico next. Then I
Okay.
want to say they're in Las Vegas, so they're back in America. Then they're in Brazil, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi, which is the final race of the year.
Okay. So
So
it's going to be
in the
interesting to see how all that plays out.
for sure,
Yeah.
it's very very optimistic for Max Verstappen and fans of his that in the past five, I want to say, races, Max has closed the championship gap by 64 points. And now, with five races left, he's only
Sure.
down by 40 points. So,
Nice.
if current form continues, Max will win the championship and rather comfortably.
Hmm.
I saw something that said that as of right now, if Max Verstappen wins every single race and sprint race for the rest of the year, which is possible, he's done it before, he's won 10 in a row before, and the way things are looking right now, he could do it. Every track remaining is a track that he's done very well at some
Okay.
point in the past, including he is the winningest driver in Formula One history driving in Mexico,
Right.
if that makes sense. I
Okay.
maybe worded that weirdly.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely revisit that in the weeks to come,
For
and I
sure.
know we're pulling for Max. I'm pulling for Max just because I know you think enough of him to wear his jersey or his shirt or whatever around, and he's uh, a very noteworthy driver in the history of F1 racing. But I know that as we kind of begin to conclude the podcast, we usually like to talk about a handful of back to the football arena, a handful of games just to kind of talk about maybe the matchups that we're seeing on the schedule. And I know you've picked out a few, starting, of course, with our beloved Dallas Cowboys.
course, the Dallas Cowboys are going to be flying to Denver, the Mile High City, to take on the Denver Broncos. Of course, the Broncos coming off a very, very emotional comeback win against the New York Giants,
Unbelievable.
who have
What
been
they
seeing
score
a
in the fourth
resurgence of
quarter?
their own.
33 points or something in the fourth quarter to
Yeah,
beat the Giants.
I believe that's correct. And then the
So
Cowboys, of
so
course, coming off a bounce back week of their own, taking care of Washington. I know last week we were pretty concerned about that game. Turns out we didn't need to be.
we were.
We
Yeah.
ended up taking care of business there. That's very good.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
saw one stat that was very interesting. It doesn't really mean anything for this matchup because I mean, how often do we play the Broncos? But the Cowboys haven't beaten the Broncos since 1995.
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Mm-hmm. I've
Yeah.
seen it a couple
Well, I mean,
times actually.
huh,
Multiple different outlets are talking about that. Just as a little fun
huh.
fact.
So Cowboys against Broncos. Bo Nix, you remember kind of singled him out in college, uh, back when he played with Auburn, I believe, that he seemed
Yep.
like a winner, and he made the Broncos roster, and probably people were thinking of him as a career backup, but he got the starting job, and he's kind of run with it.
Yeah.
And the Cowboys, of course, are in a situation where they've got, believe it or not, the number one offense in the league
And
and
number
the
32 defense.
number 32 defense. And there was talk this week that maybe the Cowboys, I don't know if this was just internet chatter, if there
Max
was anything
Crosby.
to it. Yeah, they were looking to maybe get
I
Max
heard that too.
Crosby, somebody to rush the passer, to help out their defense.
Gee, if
And
only we had someone
yeah, if
of
only we
elite
did.
caliber. If only we
Yeah,
did. Huh.
yeah. Well,
You think
they
the
let
Packers
Micah.
are willing to trade Micah Parsons? I think he'd fit our scheme really well.
Yeah, right. So if they're playing in Denver, I'm really concerned because I know that I've been to Denver, and in
As have
Denver
I.
the air is thinner, and it can play havoc with people and their conditioning. And I don't know much about Denver's defense. I haven't really studied them, but I can tell you this: if it comes down to a close game, Bo Nix, ever since college, he's just one of those guys as a quarterback who, when the pressure is the heaviest, he concerns me as an opposing quarterback that he's going to make a play that's going to make a difference in the game. So I always root for the Cowboys, but I'm a little bit concerned about them. I hope that their offense puts up a lot of points in the first three quarters. So when we get to the fourth quarter, that's their best chance. I think if it comes down, and you probably are going to agree with me on this, if it comes down to the last 5 minutes of the game, Broncos and Cowboys, and Bo Nix has the ball with a chance to go ahead, I'm really worried about that, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely would be, especially against our defense. I went ahead and pulled up the Broncos team statistics. For what it's worth, I'm not sure how much insight this will really give us, but supposedly they have scored 23.3 points per game while holding their opponents to 18.1 points per game. Of course, they're 5-2, so that shouldn't really be a big surprise. Um, too early in the season to make anything of their third and fourth down efficiency. They're actually Now that I look at this, yeah, they are not very efficient on third down offensively, but they are fairly good defensively. They've
Hmm.
only converted a third down about 36% of the time, but they do hold their opponents from converting on third down about 30% of the time.
Yeah.
So that
Well,
that could be a
it,
very, very key aspect to this game. Is can the
yeah.
Cowboys convert on third down, keep the chains
So
moving?
we need to watch those third downs. I'm encouraged that not only is CD Lamb back, George Pickens has emerged as a legitimate number two threat. CD Lamb is saying that, well, we actually have two number one receivers.
I agree
We'll
with
see
that.
it. We'll see if that's enough going into this game against the Broncos. And so, what's your second game to talk about?
Yes, let me go back to where I had all the games pulled up. I went and clicked on focusing on the Broncos here. We wanted to talk about the Miami Dolphins and the Atlanta Falcons, didn't we? Playing
Yeah,
in
Miami.
Atlanta.
Yeah, Miami. There was rumors on the internet that Quinn Ewers was going to start this week. The old Texas Longhorns quarterback, which of
Yeah,
course we have followed Quinn Ewers for a while, and I don't think that's true.
I don't think so either. Yeah,
I think Tua Tagovailoa is still the starter.
there you go.
So I think it's just internet rumor, but I've gotten a chance to watch the Falcons a few times on TV, and I've been really interested watching Bijan Robinson, the old UT running back, who is one of the best jump cutting running backs in the league. And he's, I think, making a real case for himself for some honors at the end of the season
For sure.
because this year he's been healthy and he's an elite running back who, when he gets the ball, the thing that I noticed is a lot of running backs get the ball and they immediately start kind of juking while they're in the backfield. Bijan Robinson, even back when he was in Texas, uh, would start would juke while moving forward, and I think that that is something that separates him from some of the other running backs in the league. That he can juke while still moving forward, and so I'm going to pick the Falcons. One, because Miami's horrible, and
Yeah.
yeah, and second of all, I think this may be the year that Bijan Robinson really establishes himself in the league.
Yeah, it's sure looking that way. I just pulled it up. He is in the top 10 for rushing yards at the moment, while being wildly outside of the top anything in carries. So
Yeah.
he's being incredibly efficient when he does get the ball in his hand. Hasn't really been able to find the end zone too often. I think most of that's just due to the Falcons being the Falcons. I mean, they got beat
Yeah.
30-0 by the Panthers, so.
Right.
I think that Bijan will have a good game against the very dysfunctional Miami Dolphins. I'll also pick the Atlanta Falcons to win that game. Um,
Okay.
Moving on to our final game, we have a rematch from 2 weeks ago. The New York Giants are now going to Philadelphia to play the Eagles,
Oh boy.
hoping that they can strike lightning in a bottle twice, or capture lightning in a bottle, whatever the saying is.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I'm rooting for the Giants, and
mhm.
uh, obviously, I never root for the Eagles because
Yeah,
they're the arch enemies and now the Cowboys, and um, I think we're going to find out. Jackson Dart, the rookie quarterback, Cam Scattaboo, they're the running back, have made a splash,
they have.
but they're young. But they're young,
They're young and
and
they're
I
inconsistent.
yeah, I mean, I'm going to root for the Giants, but I mean, if I'm putting money on the game, Philadelphia is the defending champions. I know they've got
It's hard to
new
play in
offensive
Philadelphia.
coordinator. Yeah, they got new coordinators and stuff, but I wouldn't be surprised if things kind of fall apart for the Giants.
I
against
also
the
don't think the
Eagles.
Eagles have lost at home. I think both of their
Yeah,
losses were on the road. Yeah.
yeah. So probably unfortunate weekend coming up. The Giants will probably fall to the Eagles, but we'll see. I mean, if the Giants upset the Eagles twice in one season, I think you have to start talking about them a little bit differently than we normally would, because as a Cowboys fan, you're going, well, the Eagles are out there, and Washington with their quarterback is a threat. Now they weren't last week when the Cowboys played them, um, but maybe the Giants are making a move, and but I don't think, my gut says that the Giants are not quite ready for what the Eagles are going to bring.
I have to agree with that. Also, I just fact checked myself. The Eagles lost to the Broncos in Philadelphia. So
Yeah.
just
Okay.
before anybody jumps down my throat about that, I stand corrected.
Yeah.
Also, I agree with what you just said about the Giants could be kind of a sneaky team to watch with this young core that they've got being on the rise. I don't think necessarily that they are much of a threat this year, just because they already got off to a rather bad start at the beginning of the season when they were still playing Russell Wilson and all that type of deal. But maybe for next season, maybe the next few years as this young core that they have keep maturing, keep developing into the players that they're going to be for their possibly long NFL careers, I would definitely be watching the New York Giants in the future, maybe not immediately this season.
Yeah.
I do agree as
Absolutely.
well. I do agree as well, even though the Broncos did just do it, it was a close, hard fought battle where the Broncos had to come back mightily, scoring 18 unanswered points in the fourth quarter to win in Philadelphia. I don't think the Giants quite have that in them.
Yeah. I think I agree with that. But anyway,
But
I think that wraps up our show for this week.
I think it does.
Yep.
Yeah. So
So hey,
with
it's been
that,
fun.
it's been very fun. Thank you for joining me. Thank you all who are listening for joining us this week. We'll be back next week. Make sure to follow on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, and follow the Inside the Helmet Instagram page. Still trying to post some nice clips from the podcast and maybe some additional posts that didn't make it into the episode. So be on the
Yeah.
lookout for those.
I would throw this out there too for
Mhm.
the purpose of this podcast is definitely to address questions that people have who are fans of the game, but
Absolutely.
maybe never played the game.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been around the game for 50 years. It kind of ages me, I guess, by saying that. And you've been around it since you were, very young. And so if you have any questions or anything, reach out and post your questions. We'd be happy to address those.
Absolutely. There are comment sections on Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram, of course. If anybody out there has questions, I would love to do a Q&A segment. Heck, do a whole Q&A episode. That would be
Yeah,
incredible to get to do. That is one, I would say, main goal that that we have for this show, is to be able to provide our knowledge and experience to those
sure.
who don't have that.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, but without anything else, I guess, thank you for watching. We'll see you next week.
Yeah. Take care, everybody.
Take care.